What's up, guys? Today I am playing my very first Pokemon TCG Pocket Tournament hosted on Limitless by Umbreon League. There were 37 total people signed up, and my goal for this tournament was to make it out of the first 6 rounds and into the knockout stage. In my very first battle, I was facing off against a Charizard EX and Silvally deck. This information was given to me prior to the battle, and something that I now know is I need to pay a lot more attention to who I am playing and what cards they are bringing. Knowing what item cards and especially supporters your opponent has definitely is helpful during crunch time, and this was something I did not take advantage of in this tournament and will in the future. In my very first battle, I was going up against the winner of the previous day's tournament, the Pylons. This was going to be a very tough test to start off, but I was definitely up to the challenge. The deck I am running for this tournament, and the deck I have been running through all of the ranked seasons in Pokemon TCG Pocket so far, is a variation of Darkrai EX, Weavile EX, and then Magnezone. If you aren't familiar with the deck, the basic idea is that you're able to do chip damage with your Darkrai EX. Every time you attach a dark energy to it, you are able to do 20 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. And then the Weavile EX just costs 1 energy to attack and does a lot more damage if your opponent has damage taken. Last, there is the Magnezone, which is able to do the most damage out of all the cards in the deck, and it is able to provide itself its own electric energy when in its Magneton form. This battle didn't start off too great. I was kind of stuck with Darkrai EX in the front. Usually I would like to have Sneasel out there in the active spot to start off, but unfortunately we had Darkrai in the front, and all we were really able to do was attach energy here on turn number 3. Unfortunately, against a deck like a Charizard EX deck with Rare Candy, you definitely need to get off to a hot start or they will absolutely steamroll you, and that is sort of what ended up happening here. My opponent used Rare Candy, which obviously is going to get him straight from a Charmander to a Charizard EX, and then Stoke got him up to the 5 energy needed to use an absolutely massive attack. Steam Artillery does 150 damage, which is enough to take out my Darkrai EX, my Weavile EX, and my Magnezone. So obviously I was super scared, and at this point I kind of realized that there wasn't going to be much I was going to be able to do. I didn't have enough energy yet onto my Darkrai to attack, and I didn't have enough energy on my Magnezone either. While none of my options really looked good, I decided to basically just sacrifice a Magnemite up into the active spot and hope I could build back up in the coming turns. Unfortunately though, my opponent used Repel, which forced me to bring in one of my benched Pokemon. One thing that I realized during this battle was that I had not updated this deck to the newest set, meaning that I still had Sabrina in instead of Repel, which is an item card rather than a supporter. Since this tournament, like many, does not allow you to switch your decks between games, I was basically stuck with having a weaker deck than I could have had for the rest of the tournament. Also, with this being my first tournament, I wasn't sure if there was such thing as a point differential as maybe a tiebreaker, so I decided to go out and try to take out at least one of my opponent's Pokemon, make it look like it was at least a little bit of a fight. My opponent ended up bringing in his Charmander for my Magnezone to take out. Unfortunately though, there is no such thing as point differential in Pokemon TCG Pocket tournaments. Not sure why I thought that might be a thing, but I ended up getting 1 point off of the previous day's champion before he ended up taking out my Magnezone. All hope was not lost though, because there's still 5 more rounds, and how these Swiss rounds work is that you play people with similar records to you, meaning I was going to play people who lost their first battle. I then learned that some people, after they lose their first battle, just decide to not show up for the second, so I ended up winning my second match on a walkover and winning the third match like that as well, meaning I was up to 2-1 even though I had lost the only battle I actually played. This was definitely a very boring and kind of frustrating way to get back into the fight, but I am back in it nonetheless, and this time I am facing off against a Solgaleo and Shiinotic deck. Although I haven't done a lot, I have played some of the most recent ranked season in Pokemon TCG Pocket, and I have been doing pretty well against Solgaleo decks, although usually not with Shiinotic, so I was cautiously optimistic going into this game. I also had a better start to this battle than the previous one. I had Darkrai EX on the bench, and I had Sneasel in the active spot, which is what I like. My opponent starts with a Cosmog in the front, and something very interesting is that my Sneasel is possibly able to take out this Cosmog on the very first turn. This Sneasel's attack is double scratch, which means I flip 2 coins, and for each heads, I do 20 damage. The bonus here, though, is that the Dark-type Sneasel actually counters the Psychic-type Cosmog, meaning if I get both heads, I am going to deal 60 damage instead of 40 to Cosmog and take it out. That obviously would be a very good way to start off this battle, but my opponent does have multiple bench Pokemon, including another Cosmog, so it would not be the end of the game. I fortified my bench a little bit with a Magnemite and then went in for the double scratch Unfortunately, I missed the heads on my coin flip, and then the computer-generated coin flip got the heads, so I did 40 damage instead of 60. I know at least when Pokemon TCG Pocket originally released, any coin flip you manually did, you actually had basically full control over whether it landed heads or tails. I'm not sure if they updated that now. I feel like I've been getting more tails on my personal coin flips, even though I'm doing it in a way that typically you should be getting heads. I'm not really sure. Maybe they updated it. Maybe I'm just falling off. Who really knows? But my opponent gets in a Gold Solgaleo EX onto the bench. And even though I felt I had a very good position on my side, my opponent was setting up very quickly and got a Gold Solgaleo EX into the active spot and got his Cosmog evolved. This was shaping up to be a very good battle, and at this point I was mostly just hoping that me missing that first attack wasn't going to cost me in the end. As my turn starts, I draw a second red supporter card. Usually you wouldn't want a double up of the supporter card, but having another red is actually great for me. I am able to now do even more damage to his Solgaleo EX 2 turns in a row, which is going to be super helpful, especially if he has Lily in his deck. This is another reason why earlier on I said you really need to pay attention to what decks your opponents are bringing, and honestly I could have even had a computer screen up with the tournament page on it. It would have been really helpful to know what my opponent had, whether they had Lily to be able to heal the Solgaleo EX or not, and whether they had other Pokemon like Sabrina or Cyrus in their deck. After 20 damage from Darkrai and hitting the manual coin flip but missing the computer-generated one this time, I was able to get my opponent's Darkrai down to 120 health. Even though I have not gotten Weavile EX at all in this battle, this is absolutely how I wanted this battle to go. I have Darkrai EX set up on my bench, I have a Sneasel/Weavile in the active spot, and then I have a Magneton set up with a Magnezone in my hand. There's a bunch of different ways this battle can go as my opponent brings in a second Solgaleo EX, but I still feel confident since I have this Magnezone on my bench that will be able to take out his active Solgaleo if he uses Soul Breaker. And right on cue, my opponent uses Soul Breaker, taking out my Sneasel, but bringing his active Solgaleo EX down to 110 health, the exact amount of damage that Magnezone does. This was going to be a huge opportunity for me to take the lead, especially because he only has 2 energy out so far, and they are both on his active Pokemon, which I am about to take out. I use Volt Charge to get a second electric energy onto my Magneton, and then apply a darkness energy to get the 3rd total energy needed onto the Magnezone to be able to take out my opponent's Solgaleo. So far, this battle is going exactly to plan, and this puts my opponent in a really tough position. Like I said before, he has no energies currently out on the board, and the only Pokemon he really has that is capable of doing any damage to turn this battle around is going to be his Solgaleo EX. Now, not only does this Solgaleo's only attack Soul Breaker not do enough to take out either of my current Pokemon on the board, but it also does 10 damage to himself, and it costs 2 energy to do the attack. My opponent did not really have anything he could do at this point. He decided to use the supporter Mars, which is going to reshuffle my hand and actually ended him sooner by giving me my Sabrina. This wasn't really a misplay by him, it was mostly just unlucky because now I am able to apply another Darkness Energy to my Magnezone and require him to switch out into one of his Shinotix, which will be taken out promptly. And now, despite winning only one of the 2 battles we've actually played, we are 3-1 on the day in the tournament, and if we get one more win, we can officially clinch a spot in the playoffs. In battle number 5, I was going against yet another very strong player using a Silvally and Rampardos deck. Rampardos is the Pokemon I was really scared about going into this battle. It requires just 1 energy for its attack, and it does 150 damage, which if you remember from earlier, is enough to take out every single Pokemon I have. Another unfortunate thing specifically for me is that Rampardos can now be active super early on since Rare Candy was now added to the game. I had a pretty good start to this game though. I had Sneasel out in the active spot and Weavile EX in my hand in order to be able to evolve on the very first turn possible. Also, even though I didn't have Darkrai on my bench, I had Rocky Element, which I was able to attach to my Sneasel, meaning if he attacked with this type Null, he was going to take damage, and my Weavile EX was going to be even stronger. As my opponent gets himself set up, I would definitely say that if you guys enjoy playing Pokemon TCG Pocket battles, or Pokemon TCG Live battles for that matter, I would definitely recommend these tournaments on Limitless. Even though I'd never played one of these tournaments before, it was very obvious between every single round where I needed to go, what I needed to do in order to play. I know the anxiety of not really knowing what to do may stop a lot of people from playing these really fun tournaments, but I absolutely need to assure you that that is not going to be the case. If you want to start out, I would absolutely recommend these Umbreon League hosted tournaments. They have a Discord server, everyone's super nice, and everyone is there to help you. On top of that, I plan to play a bunch more of these tournaments on Limitless, maybe even hosted by Umbreon League again, so I would absolutely recommend to play these and maybe you'll end up facing off against me. Moving back to the battle, my Weavile EX was able to take out my opponent's Type-Null, and what I was scared of happening actually happened. My opponent brought in his Skull Fossil to the active slot, which, as you guys know, means he is going to use Rare Candy right here and get to a Rampardos. While I was incorrect earlier, and Rampardos actually does 130 damage instead of 150, using Giovanni or Red will bump that up enough to take out my Darkrai or Weavile, and because of the counter on my Electric-type Pokemon, it is enough to take out my Magnezone. At this point, I saw the writing on the wall, and I knew I was going to lose this match, and I was going to be stuck with one more match needing to win it to get into the knockout round. One more note about these tournaments on Limitless. Later on in this summer, I am thinking about hosting my own tournaments, possibly with cash prizes, so definitely check out Limitless, and make sure you join my Discord where you will be notified if I start hosting tournaments or for any other giveaways that I pretty consistently run. Also, one more little sellout as I lose my 5th battle. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And defeat. Battle number 6 out of 6 in the Swiss rounds, we were going up against yet another Solgaleo EX and Shiinotic deck. This did give me a good amount of confidence. I have been doing pretty well against Solgaleo, and the one battle that I have won in this tournament was also against Solgaleo. I had a great start in my hand. I got Sneasel, Weavile, and Darkrai, so a perfect setup for me to start. Just as in my previous battle against the Solgaleo EX, I had a Sneasel in my active spot, and I was up against a Cosmog in my opponent's active spot with me going second. Like I was explaining before, this was going to possibly give me a chance to win the battle up front, or at least jump out to a huge lead by knocking out my opponent's active Pokemon, and he was not able to get any other starting Pokemon, so it was going to come down to 2 coin flips, one of which I possibly had control over. This was super nerve-wracking as I set up my Pokemon. I got Rocky Helmet onto my Sneasel and attached it energy, and it was time for the coin flips to see if I could knock him out right away, and I missed it. I even got the second heads, meaning if I had hit my first one, I could have knocked him out right here. My absolute biggest fear now is that that one missed coin flip could cost me my chance at the knockout round. My opponent got his Rare Candy and Solgaleo EX in, and even had Lily this time, so he healed himself up back to 180 full HP. Although he's in a much better position now, he still was not safe. I have Weavile EX, which I am able to evolve into, and by using my Dark Energy onto my Darkrai EX, I'm able to make my Weavile do tons of damage. I had a couple more things to do this turn. I decided to use Pokeball right here. I always use Pokeball as early as I can, even though there are a couple of cards my opponent can have to make me switch out my hand. I always like to have Pokeball, because if there is a starter Pokemon high up in my deck, I am able to move it out of the way and get possibly more stronger cards. I then use Red and Scratching Nails and get my opponent down to just 70 health on his Solgaleo. By this point in the battle, I had started to forget about that missed coin flip right in the beginning, but my opponent started to settle in as well. He got a Morlull down onto his bench and started building up a lot of his plays. One thing that I was not at all ready for, which is again another reason why you should absolutely pay attention to what your opponent is bringing into the battle, was my opponent had Red. That one supporter card play completely turned the battle on his head, and although my opponent was down low on his starting Pokemon, he had 2 points and I had 0. This really threw me off my game, to be honest, and again, since I was not checking what my opponent had in his deck, I didn't know if he had Cyrus or Sabrina or Repel, so I was scared to play anything onto my bench where he could possibly push my Darkrai out of play and then win right there. But also, if he has Red right here, if he has a second Red right here, he could knock out my Darkrai. Luckily, he played Professor's Research, meaning he could not play another supporter card this turn, so I was safe for right now. Safe for right now is definitely not safe enough, but with 2 energy on my Darkrai EX and just 20 health left on his Solgaleo, I was feeling super confident. All I needed was a Sabrina or Cyrus to be able to switch that Solgaleo in. That is now down to 10 health, and now a Pokemon that cannot attack at its current health. I started looking around, trying to figure out how I would be able to win this battle. Obviously, by attaching any Dark Energy to my Darkrai, I will be able to take out his Solgaleo. but unfortunately, he will be able to switch in a Shiinotic, which is not weak to Dark type, it is weak to Steel types, meaning I will only do 80 damage instead of 90. Despite having the upper hand early on in this battle and a chance to win it with a coin flip right in the beginning, it was starting to look grim. He already had one energy onto the Shiinotic, only needed one more to be able to take out my Darkrai, and we both just needed one more point to win and advance to the knockout round. As expected, he switched in his Shiinotic, and looking back at this replay, I realized I could have put my Darkness type energy onto my benched Darkrai instead, but by putting it onto my Darkrai that was in play, I'm now putting myself at a disadvantage to try to build back up. After that retreat right there, there's unfortunately nothing else I can really do, and it is back into my opponent's hands, who now has 2 Shiinotics on the board. Let's see what they are able to do. During the previous turn, I was praying that my opponent did not have a red, and now this turn, I am praying that he does not have a Sabrina, Repel, or Cyrus. Luckily, he just puts his giant cape onto his Shiinotic, and he does not do anything else, so it is back to my turn. I draw myself a Sabrina, which is going to be very, very helpful if I can make it a couple more turns. Unfortunately, I just don't have enough energy on any of my Pokemon right now, and I still have that weak link Darkrai on my bench with just 20 health, meaning if he has a Cyrus, I am going to be knocked out any minute. I decided against using my Sabrina in this turn. I didn't really see any value that it would bring since I'm not able to do any attacks. I decided to just put an energy onto my Darkrai, do 20 damage onto his Shiinotic that has a giant cape, end my turn, and just pray he does not get a Cyrus. My opponent took a very, very long and calculated pause, which I cut out right here. Before playing a Rare Candy and a Solgaleo, he attaches a second Steel energy on and uses Rising Road to get into the active spot. At this point, I was praying he didn't have a second red and couldn't knock out my Darkrai, but instead comes out the Sabrina to put me in my grave. A very good play by opponent forces me to make a move that no matter what ends in a loss for me, and means we are not going to be able to make it to the knockout round. My worst nightmare came true. The coin flip came back to haunt us, and despite having some close battles, we ended 3 wins, 3 losses, and in 18th place out of 37 players. Congratulations to these 2 players for making it to the finals. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.